Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, Adding BPM to a Microsoft Ecosystem. I'm Ellie Stutz, your host for today's webinar. We've got an amazing webinar for you today. Really looking forward to it. We have Ric Howe, who is a Microsoft Partner Technology Strategist. He'll be coming on with us. We have Ross Offer, who's a technical lead for Atkins, a PNMsoft customer. And we'll also be getting a demo of our BPM software from James Luxford, a CTO at PNMsoft. The agenda for today's webinar, we'll be talking about your Microsoft ecosystem, what it means to add BPM to your Microsoft ecosystem. We'll be hearing from Ross about the story of success of implementing a BPM solution at Atkins. We'll be talking with Ric Howe about implementing BPM and what BPM can do for a Microsoft ecosystem in your organization. And we'll be seeing that BPM demo from James towards the end of the webinar. And of course, we'll be taking your questions towards the end of the webinar. I encourage you throughout the webinar to ask questions in the GoToWebinar questions widget, and we will address them at the end. And I'd also like to mention that the recording of this webinar will be available from pnmsoft.com. Should have actually a recording link right from the home page as you scroll down. So if you somehow missed the webinar or missed part of it due to whatever reason, you should be able to access that recording within about 24 hours. So let's get started. So your company has an ecosystem. This ecosystem is actually not that different from an ecosystem out in nature. It has various different forms of life, various different users, various different resources, different areas and categories and departments. And these different users, categories, departments, and data interact with each other. You can see in this ecosystem that we have on the screen maybe some of the Microsoft products that are important to your organization. And the fact is that you've chosen right. You've chosen the best tools that are out there in the business. In this ecosystem, and we're going to actually see not what's wrong, but how you can improve on your existing Microsoft ecosystem. So you have chosen great tools. Okay, you've got the top of the line ERP, CRM, database, development environment. You're very happy with the tools you have, which is great. And you also have the best people. We hope that you believe in your company and your people, your users, and your employees. So those two things are really going for you. But something isn't quite right. What isn't quite right? Well, your organization has various pains. And what could these pains be? And these are some of the concerns and pains that we hear from our clients. Well, one is that your data is static. It gets stuck in separate siloed systems. Another is that your people don't have a single version of the truth. Your people don't have visibility over processes and data. Your people can't collaborate on mission-critical processes. And there's no overarching platform to manage interactions between data, processes, and systems. So does this sound familiar? Do you have complaints like this from members of your organization? A lot of organizations we speak with do have these pains and complaints. So what can we do about that? Well, introducing BPM. BPM stands for Business Process Management, and BPM is the gold standard for managing business processes in organizations. BPM actually is not just about process or workflow, but today BPM enables end-to-end intelligent process applications. And these applications connect users, systems, and devices to improve things like customer service, quality, efficiency, and operations across an organization. Analysts today recognize that BPM is the optimal way for managing end-to-end organizational processes, and in fact, most large and even mid-sized organizations today use some form of BPM to manage and optimize their business processes. And that's because BPM enables you to compete and change in a changing market, because today's marketplace is changing ever more rapidly, and BPM actually, central to BPM is the ability to move, to change, and not to be static, and to move with the market in order to compete. So this is what your Microsoft ecosystem might look with BPM. It's the same ecosystem, it's the same products, but now these products and your people, some of these animals here representing users, are now connected together, okay? They're interacting with each other, and they're in motion. So once you have connectivity, your users now have visibility across the organization. They're not just, you don't just have users using SharePoint and they don't know anything about what's going on in CRM or ERP or SAP. More users have visibility over more. And now that there's connectivity and visibility, users can collaborate together across an organization on business critical processes. And the organization is now put in motion. It's not static. Data is not static. It's moving. That gives your organization the ability to change and adapt according to changing business needs and competition. And it's not just about being able to change and make any changes you want. You need to have elements that enable you to control change so that you're making the right changes and you have visibility over changes. So those are some of the things that BPM adds or can add to your Microsoft ecosystem. And as a BPM provider, we're actually one of the leading Microsoft-centric BPM providers in the industry. We're a Microsoft Gold partner, and using our BPM suite, which is called Sequence, you can do things like create advanced workflows for SharePoint, Dynamics CRM, and other Microsoft products. You can enable your .NET developers to create business process applications using their .NET skills. You can put business processes in the cloud. You can connect systems and users around business critical processes. And you can make processes more available to a wider user base and on mobile devices. So that's really who we are. We're a Gold Microsoft partner. We're recognized by analysts, including Gartner, as the leading Microsoft-centric BPM provider in the world. And we bring to the table not only a Microsoft-centric technology, but also a methodology that our people believe in, which enables them to help customers implement BPM projects quickly and at the highest success rate in the industry. So if you're looking to do a BPM project and you're mid-sized to enterprise and Microsoft is important to your organization, then PNMsoft is certainly someone you should be speaking with. And actually, Bill Gates highlighted this in an address to the Office Developers Conference by giving an example about how PNMsoft is able to pull data across or from different Microsoft systems into one platform, and a platform that's very simple to use and that has the ability to make a big difference for an organization. And you can actually watch that Bill Gates video if you go to the homepage pnmsoft.com. There's a link there to watch that great video. So actually, right now we're going to go to Ross Offer from Atkins. Ross is a technical lead for the Atkins IS Integrated Applications team, who manage and design and implement changes within the business applications portfolio. Atkins is using PNMsoft's BPM technology Sequence to implement and optimize key company processes, including their commercial service delivery processes and more. So just bear with me for a second and we'll go right to Ross from Atkins. Hi, I'd like to welcome Ross Offer from Atkins. Ross, it's great to have you with us today on the webinar. So please, could you tell us a little bit about Atkins?
Yeah, sure. So Atkins is an engineering design consultancy business. Originally began in the UK and now has very much a global presence. Big operations in UK and Europe, in fact, North America, the Far East, Middle East, and into the Asia-Pacific regions also. Principally doing engineering design consultancy work, infrastructure type projects, widening motorways, building bridges, nuclear power plants, that sort of stuff. So, as I say, pretty much a design consultancy, project management type operation.
Okay, that's great. And what is your role at Atkins?
So I work in the internally facing IS function as a technical lead. The area that I work in is kind of corporate applications, so it's finance, HR, those types of systems, and I lead a team called Integrated Applications, which is essentially tool sets and processes that interact with the core finance and HR systems, so BPM, document management, payment solutions, that sort of thing.
Okay. A few years ago, your organization decided to implement BPM. Why is that?
So 4 or 5 years ago now, there was a big push to move away from kind of manual forms-based processing, specifically forms that needed approvals. We wanted to use the technology for it. We wanted to try and introduce some kind of Amazon shopping cart experience, and BPM seemed the logical approach. We looked at Oracle BPM at the time because we use Oracle products for our core corporate systems, but typically we're a Microsoft shop elsewhere. So we looked at Oracle but quickly dismissed it because of the kind of user experience, and we generally have resistance from our users around using Oracle products, so it seemed sensible to move in a Microsoft direction. Sequence was an obvious choice for us, as we were actually reselling it to some of our customers as part of our commercial offering, so we kind of brought it in-house also. We decided to start with a...
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you, what process did you choose to start with?
Yeah, so we thought that we needed to get user engagement because this is something that we would want to use longer term and for lots of other business processes. So we thought we'd go with an emotive topic. It was a bit of a risky strategy because if it didn't work out, we'd have had egg on our face. But what we did is we decided to use expense claims. So expense claims historically were Excel spreadsheets emailed in or posted into the shared service center where they would get scanned and then keyed into the finance system, typically a 3-week, 4-week turnaround from submission to payment. We put that into Sequence, and we turned that payment time round, subject to approvers doing what they should do, to 2 or 3 days rather than 3 or 4 weeks. So, as I say, it was a risky strategy, but it was hailed as success by our user community, and that's relatively rare for IT projects. So it kind of paved the way to then use Sequence for other things in the future.
Okay, now, how is Microsoft technology part of this whole story?
As I alluded to earlier, typically we're a Microsoft house anyway in terms of our operating system and our productivity suite. We also use CRM, so the end user community is accustomed to using Microsoft products and that kind of UI. So for us, it was important to try and move away from, as I say, the Oracle applications that people weren't particularly keen on using, and Microsoft technology that Sequence was based on seemed the most obvious approach to that. Because we're also integrating with other Microsoft technologies such as CRM as part of our kind of suite of Sequence processes now, it was a good fit for us.
Okay. Now, the expense process, I guess, was successful. What processes came next?
Off the back of the expenses piece, we kind of then branched off looking at both HR and finance processes, but also looking at ways in which we could kind of enable and run the business. So we started up a track looking at timesheet and leave bookings, which was in the kind of on the corporate side, and then we also looked on the sales side at introducing what we call our stage gates process, which is basically managing opportunities, taking stage gate reviews, risk assessment, that sort of stuff, through to the kind of go live of a job or a project. And we have got all sorts of touch point integrations there, both in terms of the kind of back-end Oracle finance systems, but also to Microsoft CRM. We use Microsoft Project Server as well, and we've got connections coming out of Sequence to all of those technologies. So we took kind of a two-prong approach, one into the sales and opportunity management area, and one down into the corporate kind of business process route, finance and HR.
So it seems like BPM solutions have become an integral part of your business. What kind of benefits are you seeing from them?
One of the things that's really important to us is keeping a consistent user journey. So what we started to do is we started to make all of our Sequence processes embedded into our SharePoint, Microsoft SharePoint intranet portal. So we make use of the SharePoint My Site features, and users go to find these processes, their expense claims, their timesheets, their annual leave requests, all in one single place. They also are not particularly aware that they're using Sequence as a technology because it's all branded and embedded into the SharePoint platform. So from our point of view, that was another reason for choosing Sequence, because it had that close coupling with the Microsoft technology set. So from our point of view, we've got a number of processes that we use that are really intuitive, that save a lot of time in terms of the submission and a lot of effort from a back-end process point of view in terms of management. So time and cost saving without a doubt, and tight integration and with our underlying technology, or our existing technology, should I say, and branding has really helped to kind of drive forward the use of this across our business processes.
Wow, so it sounds like BPM has been a real success story for your organization. Let's say I'm an organization that has a Microsoft infrastructure. What 2 or 3 main reasons would you tell me why I should use BPM?
I think it comes back to a couple of things I've mentioned already. I think the ability to closely link and integrate with existing Microsoft solutions, which are kind of bread and butter out there now in the corporate environment. We're also starting to do some work around mobile. So we're making sequence processes available to mobile devices, both in terms of kind of responsive web UI type applications, as well as iOS applications for iPhone and an iPad, and even down to that level, although we're delivering Apple-type applications, we're using Microsoft technology to deliver that to the devices, the Microsoft Intune platform. So from our point of view, we found that by utilising kind of Microsoft product, or a Microsoft-based product, we've been able to tightly tie up all of our other systems and kind of keep with that roadmap that we have as using Microsoft products in our estate.
Great. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with other BPM products, but how do you see Sequence specifically as a strong BPM offering?
One of the things that we're an advocate for is kind of agile, lean, customer-centric working. So it's important for us to be able to be reactive to change that needs to happen within our organisation and therefore our technology. So one of the things that I think kind of pushes Sequence above some of the other products is the ability for hot change and being able to make change on the fly, as necessary, subject to all the stringent change processes that need to be in place. But it's that kind of reactive change, positive environment that the Sequence development platform provides that I think really makes you guys stand out from the rest.
That's excellent. Now, I understand there are plans to utilize Azure in the future for your organization. How does Sequence or BPM fit into those plans?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're moving to kind of a much more applications in the cloud kind of approach to make our services more resilient, accessible from anywhere, and obviously drive down some of our internal costs. What we're doing is we're making use of infrastructure as a service in the Azure cloud. So we're building virtual machines that we can use to deploy sequence processes to. Obviously, the Azure cloud is geared up to deliver a number of operating systems. But again, because we're looking specifically at Microsoft products, it's easy for us to deploy virtual machines, even with Atkins images on top of them. We're putting SharePoint on top of that, which is what we need for the sequence runtime. And one of the big benefits, as I see from the Azure point of view, is the ability to auto scale the resources. So we have a very heavy utilization of our sequence timesheet process on a Friday afternoon. We've got 15,000 people around the world all putting their timesheets in roughly around the same sort of time. So that needs a fairly beefy infrastructure to handle that load. But that's once a week. We have much lower throughput with our other processes during the rest of the week. So one of the benefits that the Azure platform can bring to us is that the service can scale automatically. So it can scale based on date time, or it can scale based on kind of resource utilization. So CPU this much, throw another web server into the mix, and so on and so on. So it's part of our longer term strategy to kind of cloudification, if that's a word, but certainly some of the additional features that Azure can bring that some of the other cloud providers don't seem to be quite mature with yet, but will add benefit to us from a cost saving point of view, if nothing else.
Okay, well, that's a lot on your plate, I guess, for the future. Ross Offer from Atkins, I want to thank you so much for being with us on today's webinar, and we look forward to talking with you in the future.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, that was great. We'll move right on to our next section, and I'd like to welcome to the floor Ric Howe from Microsoft. Welcome, Ric.
Hi there, Ellie.
Now, Ric, you're a partner technology strategist for Microsoft. You've run your own business. You became an IT manager for a number of private schools. You've been part of VMware transformation projects and migrating complicated SQL databases and applications. And you've spent the last few years enabling users to get more from their data. So that's really great experience, Ric, and it's great to have you with us here, coming from Microsoft at this PNMsoft webinar. And we have some questions for you, so let's get straight to them. What is your role and experience with Microsoft?
So yeah, I've been with Microsoft for the last couple of years, and during that time it's been quite interesting because I've seen a big shift and focus from just SQL Server as a database technology to a much broader data strategy, you know, from self-service BI right through to automation and process control and that kind of thing.
And what kind of client challenges have you seen around connecting data between different systems?
So I think that's one of the most challenging things, really. I've seen it cost a lot of money, and I've seen it cost a lot of time, and I've seen it go wrong quite a few times. I think that's because it's inherently complicated. And you know, not only are these systems particularly complicated, you know, it's the people element that actually tends to make these things more difficult. You know, getting different departments to communicate is often more difficult than actually getting the underlying systems to actually communicate. So what I've seen people doing more is just simply pulling the data out. You know, not worrying about actually feeding any information back in, but just worrying about getting some data out so that they can do some analysis. So, you know, a lot of organizations have found that a big struggle, really, because of the complication.
So I guess you're echoing some of the pains that I was talking about earlier about connecting data between people and systems within a growing organization. What kind of challenges and gaps have you seen around particularly data and process or automation?
Yeah, so I think if we think about analytics, you know, analytics can be broken down into three areas, really. Most organizations are using just the first one. The first phase, descriptive analytics, you know, what happened. A few now are beginning to do the more predictive analytics, you know, working out what's going to happen in the future. But very few have actually taken up the third type, which is prescriptive analytics, you know, what do we do about that? And so I think because we're seeing a lot of companies moving up that stack, you know, that's the nirvana, right? Is to get to the point where we can actually act very, very quickly on the insights that we're able to get. You know, we're getting some way to being able to put data in people's hands, but actually, you know, we need to take that next step now to make sure that we actually action that. Yeah.
Now, what potential do you see in BPM, particularly, to solve these challenges?
So I think it's a really, really good time. I think that we're you know, we've reached a point now where a lot of organizations are beginning to see the value of automation, and not just in the obvious senses. You know, this morning I was doing a data center transformation workshop where we were looking at System Center and different data center products, and I think you know, we mentioned it earlier about using Azure and things like that to actually provision new systems, and there was actually a customer in the room who said that it used to take them 3 months to actually provision new systems and to make changes like that to their systems because of all of the change control they needed to go through and all the paperwork that needed to go through it and all the approvals that needed to come in. So that process was really, really long. And actually they had a management consultancy in the room as well. And the guy sort of turned to him when we mentioned about, you know, being able to spin up these services in sort of 15 minutes in our cloud platform. You know, he turned to the management consultancy guy next to him and said, you know, what are you doing? You know, you take 3 months. He's like, well, actually, we got it down to about a month now, but you know, that's still a month. So it's still a really, really long process to make these changes. And so some of the other things that actually came out during the day was Twitter. So, we were talking about security, and we were talking about, actually making a change on Twitter or posting something on Twitter. Actually, you don't want people in the organization to have those passwords or that access. So actually what they were doing is they've created a portal, you post in the portal, it goes to 4 managers, once 2 approve it, then it gets tweeted. So no one along that whole chain actually has the Twitter passwords. And, they're beginning to then automate that into other processes as well. So, merging these different departments and actually getting departments to kind of communicate in a way that they've not been able to before, through using these automation tools. So I'd like to call out another one, really. I think, amazing company called ThyssenKrupp. Now they actually provide elevators as a service. And so what they used to do was they used to just have a 6-month maintenance schedule where they'd send out an engineer to every single one of their lifts and perform a recce and, take some readings from the telemetry on it and that kind of thing. But it was very reactive. So what they've done now is feed all of the telemetry into a system that's able to automate the maintenance schedules. So it actually scores the health of lifts in real time, and they're able to actually send an engineer out when it goes below a certain threshold, say 75%. So, really, really interesting use of automation there, and actually it's fundamentally changed the way that they run their business now.
Now, Ric, BPM is also about automation, but it's also about adapting to changes. From what you've seen of P&M Soft and our focus on BPM and change, do you think that we have the ability to solve some of the pains you've seen among your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, like I said, the 3 months that it takes to often make change, that's when you maybe come up with an insight. So like I said, a lot of people are now able to get this insight. We've kind of moved to this world of self-service BI and that kind of thing. People can get data out, they can get the insight, but actually when it comes to implementing that, it's still a very laborious process. So I think, being able to automate that, being able to actually make that process much simpler and need less paperwork, need less, manual approval, I think that's a really, really great thing. I think it's going to change some industries, like that Lift company, fundamentally change the way they run their business. I think we're going to see a lot of change in the industry now, in many industries.
Okay. Any other real-life examples that you can think of, either ones that you've seen or hypothetical, where BPM could really affect a step change in an organization?
So I mean, coming from a school, I've been on the receiving end of a lot of that painful manual process, and I ran the infrastructure there. So every time we needed to make a change, we needed to log it, we needed to record it. Everything had to be recorded, and any time actually we went outside of that, things tended to break and tended to go wrong. So we still needed that framework there. So once we were able to start actually putting some of these processes into machines, into computers, computers are much better at organization and making sure they actually run through all the different steps. Humans are pretty bad at that. Once we've sort of moved over to that, things became a lot easier. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that now in other areas as well.
Okay, well, that's exactly the type of optimization that BPM suites such as ours enable. So I'm happy that you're kind of really seeing the pains as they're happening and the growth pains that are happening among customers on the ground. So I think your experience is really valuable. And I want to thank you so much for being with us, Ric Howe from Microsoft, and I encourage you to stay on for James's demo, which is up next. So we're going to go now to CTO of P&M Soft, James Luxford, for a demo of our intelligent BPM suite sequence. James, I'll make you the presenter.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Okay, so I'm just going to illustrate with our BPM product sequence a few of the concepts that have been discussed. And I'm going to use an example Microsoft ecosystem as part of my demonstration, and that includes Microsoft products such as Dynamics CRM, SharePoint, SQL Server, including analysis services and reporting services, and also possibly bespoke .NET applications or even other systems. And these are all used by both internal and external users, all possibly using Office as well as part of their desktop. So this is what I'm going to use to illustrate the ideas. First of all, just let me show you a few of the different ways that users interact with Sequence, because this is very key, that we have users interacting with processes in the way that are familiar with them. So for instance, we have a SharePoint-based portal. This allows you to be able to create a BPM user experience using our web parts to surface messages, processes that have started, to be able to start processes, and to be able to see some dashboards as well. But as well as SharePoint, we find many of our users, they may not be in the portal all the time, so they may want to use Outlook or other email clients to access notifications and tasks. And here is an example of a list of tasks. And within those tasks, the email can contain as much information about the process, including links to be able to action those processes, and also our one-click buttons that allows me as the user to be able to action those just by clicking on a button. And then again, if I'm out and about, we can use our mobile portal, HTML5 mobile portal. It works on all devices, smartphones and tablets, to be able to access all of my BPM messages, tasks and so on, and to be able to interact with those tasks and processes as well. And Ric had touched on analytics as well. It's not just about automating the processes, it's about being able to understand how those processes are performing and react accordingly. So in order to do that, we use reporting services within SharePoint to be able to surface some analytics, such as bar charts, pie charts, lists of information, with drill-down capabilities as well. And this can be on the business data flowing through the process and also the metadata within the process. And I'll be touching a little bit more on our intelligent analytics capabilities in a moment. And also KPIs, SLAs, being able to, at a glance, being able to see, well, what's good news, what's bad news, how are we performing? And not just how did we perform last month, but how are we performing now in real time. So here I can see two of my KPIs, they're in the green. I don't need to worry about whether they're good news or bad news. I can focus on the one in the middle here, the average time. The average time is taken to do, in this case, service requests. A little more about that in a moment. So let's have a look at what all this can mean. We have an example process here just to illustrate the ideas. Before I dip into here, just let me show you one last interface that we can use. We have a special edition of Sequence called Sequence CRM Edition, where we have some very nice integration with Dynamics CRM, allows users to work within CRM as their BPM interface, whether that's the dashboards, being able to do their tasks, perform actions, and so on. So how can we bring all of this to life? Ellie mentioned at the start, it's about taking those systems that we mentioned, Dynamics CRM, SharePoint, other data sources, SQL Server, as we mentioned, and bringing those in together and presenting them to the user. Information is nothing if you can't do anything with it. Similarly, if you can't gather more information from the users and collect that into your systems, you're having a problem. So this is our design environment. This is where you capture your processes in Sequence. But this isn't just like Visio. It's not just a static diagram. This is what's actually executed. And each of these steps in the process will actually do some actions. We call them activities. And we have a very rich palette of activities available to us over here including the ability to be able to extend them beyond what comes out of the box. And this example that I've put together, we've created some swim lanes, not to show the actors in the process, but just to show how we can interact with each of the systems that I mentioned earlier. And we've got the external and internal users here. We've got the intelligent analytics that I mentioned. We have SharePoint and Dynamics CRM, and also our bespoke .NET application, whatever that may be, whatever you may have created in-house. And also, sitting behind all Microsoft systems, SQL Server, with its capabilities to be able to analyze, to be able to report, to be able to integrate through the additional components I show here. So let's just talk a little bit about what Sequence can bring to this picture. So our external users, being able to bring external users into a process, whether that's by allowing them to send an email in and we respond to that email being received, or whether we expose a form on our website that the external user can fill in and start the process off that way. Or we may allow our internal users to be able to do it in the same way. But for our internal users, we may well want to give them more information. Just very quickly to illustrate that, let me show you in our UX Studio. So the external users, very simple, clean form, not capturing much information from them. But for our internal users, we want to capture more information from them about what is being requested. So we can tailor the view to the particular channel or the particular set of users that we're interested in. And then once our users have submitted it, whether it's internally or externally, we hear a lot from our customers that people submit requests, start processes, and then don't hear anything. So we have the ability to be able to send acknowledgements to say, yes, we've received your request. Then as we're going through the process, updating the user with messages about how we're doing. And then finally, at the end of the process, it's all done, this is what the outcome is. But then to get to that point where we've completed the request, we need to be able to get our users doing the work. And what's key here is it's not just a case of let's just assign it to a big bucket of people. What's key within business processes is making sure the task gets to the right person at the right time. So within Sequence, we can have some complex work allocation using the business data or the metadata of the process to determine who's going to get this. The request could come from a certain set of customers or from a particular postcode, therefore we assign it to that team. Or this is an approval that needs to go because of the threshold to that individual. Whatever those business logic may be to determine who needs to do the work, we can capture that. But there may also be circumstances where we need a human to think, okay, this is a bit of an exceptional situation. Who should we allocate this to make sure this gets done in time? And then moving down here, I've talked about intelligent analytics. Within Sequence, we can measure just about everything. Every step, we know when it was started, who started it, and when it was completed. So we can measure single tasks, parts of processes, whole processes, see how they're performing. And we can measure that as an SLA. So we know this particular task needs to be done within a certain SLA. But if we're starting to approach the SLA, I never like to talk about reached SLAs because then it's too late. In this case, well, let's have a look. How are we performing? And we have a capability called Statistics within Sequence that allows us to measure across all of the process instances that are relevant how we're performing. So if we're starting to get towards the SLA in this time, particular case, we might then want to get a team leader or a supervisor to determine who's best to action this. If we're well within our SLA, then we can carry on with business as usual. But we also want to keep an eye, once that task is allocated, we want to make sure that it is then actioned in time. So we can have an SLA reminder timer running. And if that time's out, we send a reminder to the person that should be actioning it. and then perhaps a little later they still haven't done it, let's escalate it to a supervisor, to a manager, so that all the work gets done in time. There's other ways that we can control the flow. We can execute business rules using our business rules engine and determine what we're going to do as the outcome of that. If it's a simple Boolean business rule, we can cope with those. Or if it's a business rule that can have multiple outcomes or have multiple conditions within it, we can support that as well. Here's an example. There can be 3 possible outcomes depending on what the situation is, determines what we want to do. Which leads me nicely onto the next swim lane, SharePoint. Very powerful integration with SharePoint, whether that's responding to an event in SharePoint using the SharePoint event handling mechanism to respond to a document being published or a list being updated. And that can start the process. And all of the metadata and data within that content is then passed into sequence to allow us to use that within the process. And once we've started the process, we may want to then create some content, whether that's creating a folder in a document library and perhaps copying a document from one folder, say a template or a template library where we've got standard document templates all that have been approved, and copying a blank to that folder. And later in the process, we may want to update a list or update the metadata on that document that we've copied. Or we may even want to take that document, it's on premise while we are authoring and approving it. Once we've approved it, we then want to publish it to SharePoint Online so that our external users can access it within SharePoint Online. Lots of other capabilities within it. What's key here is it's within the process. It's about creating content or even retrieving content as well from SharePoint within the process. Similarly for Dynamic CRM, we have a CRM listener that can respond to events happening within CRM, whatever that may be. Consequently, once the processes are started, we may want to create a case here within CRM. This particular request may be handled by the team that work in Dynamic CRM. So let's create a case in there and a corresponding activity, and that will allow them to action the task within there rather than possibly within sequence. We can retrieve data from CRM, whether that's lists of customers, lists of cases, lists of activities, and we can process that. We can also call CRM functions. So this allows us to wrap up some quite complex functionality into a function that can then easily be called. Similarly over here, updating a case. We created the case over here. Later on, we may want to update the status on it if it was handled externally as well as internally. And then moving on to our .NET application. Application built with .NET. We can, within that application, call web services within sequence that can then start a process. Or we can use sequences listener architecture to create our own listener that can then respond to events in that or other systems. And then we can interact with that application through its API, in this case using Windows Communication Foundation services. Similarly, we could use standard web service SOAP calls or RESTful services. And we may want to push data into the application or pull data out of that application and use it in the process, whether that's presenting it to the users on forms, in messages, or pushing it to other systems as well, as we're doing here. But before we move down here, we also have full error handling. If there's any systems in the ecosystem, things do go wrong. Systems stop responding, network connections fail, internet connections break. The process needs to be robust and needs to handle that. So we have very robust error handling that allows us to respond to problems and then correct them, whether that's just letting someone know that there's been a problem or possibly retrying. Let's wait for 5 minutes and then retry the integration point. If after 3 attempts it still hasn't happened, then we can send a task to a user to look at it, or possibly raise a ticket in an IT help desk system, whatever it may be. And Sequence has a very comprehensive API. It's all .NET based. So within your .NET application, you can either call it through services or directly through using our DLLs as part of your application. Very powerful. You can do a lot with our API. Then finally, as I mentioned earlier, underpinning everything in a Microsoft environment is our friend SQL Server. We can respond using our database listener to events within SQL Server. Could be a row appearing in a table. Could be a column changing within a row within a table. We may want to push data into SQL Server by executing a stored procedure. Or we can use our special activities that allow us to insert data into the sequence tables or to update data within the sequence tables. Other ways that we can do this through web services, ODBC calls, and we can also surface information from SQL Server again on our forms. So this diagram is showing mainly how we can interact with other systems in the process, but we've also got virtually the same capabilities that allow us to surface that information on our forms, whether it's showing a list of customers from Dynamic CRM or a set of list items from SharePoint on a form, or showing on a form within a grid the details that are held within a table within SQL Server. And once all that data is in SQL Server, of course you can use your analysis services, your reporting services, or integration services to be able to then do more with that, to analyze it further, to be able to take it to the next step. That's just a very quick look at how Sequence can introduce BPM into a Microsoft ecosystem. And by that we mean automate the process, but bring those systems together. It's not about plumbing systems together. It's about taking information, content out of those systems, presenting it to the users, allowing them to do their task without having to switch between different systems, and then push the information back in. It means that tasks can be done quicker, reduces human latency, the process is more productive. But with the use of our analytics, we can also then continually improve that process. We can look to see how it's performing, whether that's dynamically within the process as it's running, as I showed here, or by looking to do some process improvement after the event, once we've analyzed how our process is performing. Okay, so that's all I have to say for now. If you have any questions regarding what I've said here, feel free to use the questions facility within GoToWebinar. Otherwise, I shall pass back.
James, before you minimize that diagram, first of all, thanks very much for the demo. And also, if you do have questions and you're listening, please do enter them now. We have a few minutes to take them in the GoToWebinar widget. James, I think just what's remarkable about this diagram that you're showing is we're seeing a process, and a process that could exist in your organization, in many organizations, that's connecting SharePoint, Dynamic CRM, users from different departments, database, SQL, all in one workflow. And I think, James, you can probably speak better about this than I can. You've seen a lot of customer implementations. This kind of process actually exists in many of our clients. This kind of process is not uncommon. I mean, we're not drawing out a kind of extreme scenario. This is almost like a straightforward scenario that we see in the field where clients need to connect systems like SharePoint, Dynamic CRM, and their users in one workflow.
Yes.
Correct
yes.
me if I'm wrong.
No, it's very much. Very rarely in a business process is it just about people. You always need information from systems. And historically, before they're automated, people would switch to those systems and go and have a look and hold that information in their head, or cut and paste it into an Excel document or something. We call it the swivel chair issue, where people have to swivel between different applications. But here we can pull out all of that information. We've got lots of good examples, such as the Portuguese government, where they're pulling information out of SAP and other systems and presenting everything the user needs to know at that point to action the task. So rather than having to go to a number of different screens within different systems, it's all there. So yeah, so this, there's no such thing really as a simple business process. once you start looking at, well, what information do people need in order to be able to action that, you do need to start looking at, well, how can I bring all of my systems together and share that information with the users? So, yeah, so this is a very common scenario.
Okay, one question we have, James, is how does Sequence enable .NET developers to more easily create processes?
Okay, so yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, well, the way that we have designed Sequence is to allow several different roles to be able to create processes. You can have your power user, someone who knows their way around Excel, can create a lot of functions and macros in Excel possibly, or use the function capabilities. We've got the business analysts, and we've got the .NET developers. All of those people can create processes within Sequence. If you're a .NET developer, we allow you to go that much further. So for instance, just let me show you very quickly within our UX Studio. By default, you can do it graphically. If you want to get down into the next level, you have access to the markup behind it. You can create code behind and so on. If you want to. You don't have to, but if you're a .NET developer, that's how you may want to work. A .NET developer can also create external services that allow you to be able to then do some very rich functionality that's part of that external service, but that's published to Sequence and can be easily used. You can also create custom activities and publish those to this environment as well. So it may be something that does a very clever piece of functionality or a very sophisticated piece of integration, and that can be published to our set of activities. You can also, I'm showing here using Sequence as sort of the front end. Some of our customers use Sequence as a workflow engine, and you can use our API to surface task lists to start processes within your own application. Or you may want to just surface those information but still use our forms technology. There's lots of ways that .NET developers can use Sequence to create very rich, very powerful applications. But what's key is, because you're using a BPM suite, a lot of that work is already done for you. So you don't have to create lots of forms. You don't have to do the authentication. You don't have to do the database management. All of that's taken care of for you. You can focus on the real value add parts. How does the business need to interact with the processes? What's the user experience going to be like? How do I make sure the process is as efficient as possible and that people do things when they need to?
That's great, James. We have actually quite a few questions coming up. Arindam has asked a couple. He'd like to actually see some details inside the box of the activity to see how the tasks or the activities are actually put together. And he's also asking, can these tasks be completely done by a business analyst without the help of a developer?
Okay, so let me very quickly just show you a couple. So for instance, the message is a good example. And just while I'm opening it, to ask that question, yes, everything that I've created in here is done using wizards. I haven't had to write any lines of code, so I haven't had to be an IT developer. So for instance, here, this is defining the message that's going out to the external user to acknowledge that they have that we've received a request. The first thing that we do is we define the message, and the message can contain content from the process. Here, this is our data model within the process. Every step in there is available to me, and just by finding the appropriate field within here, I can then just add content to those messages just by clicking on, in this case, that's the company name that the contact is coming from. And that's how that field appeared up there.
James, I don't want to cut you short, but we have just a couple more minutes here, and there's quite a few questions coming in. So Kevin is asking, does Sequence support BPMN? In other words, can you convert a BPMN flow into a Sequence flow?
Yes, so we can take XML process definitions because it can be BPMN, 1 and 2.0 and other formats from other modeling tools, and we can then import those into Sequence.
And we have a question from another Kevin. Can you consume existing SharePoint workflows and forms into Sequence?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Not consume them so much. What is an interesting point, and it's probably as relevant with Dynamic CRM as well as SharePoint, but also other systems as well. So you may have GP, you may have SAP, for instance. If there's a process in those systems that is working, then by all means carry on using them. And Sequence, so SharePoint, we can start SharePoint workflows. We can start dynamic CRM workflows from within Sequence. Similarly, those workflows can also call Sequence processes as well. So yes, we can launch them. Whether you would want to, I mean, that's probably more appropriate, especially with SharePoint, if you already have a large set of SharePoint workflows. What we find is the majority of our customers, what they actually do is they recreate their workflows within Sequence, simply because you have more power there. There's some functionality within our workflow engine that you just don't have within SharePoint. But I do appreciate, yes, if you do have them and they're working very well, leave them there and we can call them from within Sequence.
Wonderful. James, I want to thank you very much. We've kind of run out of time, even though we do have some more questions. And if you didn't get your question answered, we'll try to do so after the webinar. We'll try to get in touch with you. Thank you so much, James. I'm going to take the, I'm going to become presenter again just to sum up. So just to sum up, the benefits of adding BPM to your Microsoft ecosystem, you'll be able to create intelligent process applications that improve quality, service, and operations. You'll leverage your Microsoft investment. You'll gain visibility, connectivity, collaboration, optimization. You'll be connecting people with mobile processes and social collaboration. You'll be able to manage and control ongoing process change, as we emphasized, and you'll be improving customer service and even enabling customer self-service. Just some of the benefits of adding BPM to your Microsoft ecosystem, and these are just some of our customers who span the globe, as you can see, enterprise organizations in many different industries that are proud customers of PNMsoft. And you too can start your journey with PNMsoft towards business process transformation with our world-leading BPM experts. We have the leading success rate among BPM vendors, and we believe that we can succeed with you together. So if you're interested, you are very welcome to contact us and request a demo of Sequence BPM, either by email or on our website or by phone using the numbers below. We look forward to speaking with you. And as I mentioned, this webinar will be available. The recorded version will be available if you missed part of it or if you'd like to share it with a colleague. On our website, on our homepage, there'll be a link there sometime tomorrow, if not earlier. And we thank you very much. I'd like to thank Rick and James and Ross for participating in the webinar, and I'd like to thank you all for listening in and watching. And we look forward to more webinars at PNMsoft and with our partners and customers. Thank you so much.